put one more layer of fabric on, and this layer of fabric is called peel ply. Now, I'm not sure what peel ply is made out of, but it's called peel ply. And what you do with peel ply is we're going to place it over top of the fiberglass and smooth it in. And what the peel ply will do is suck resin up into it. And when this is all dried and hardened, the peel ply peels right off and leaves a nice smooth coat. What it's going to do is fill the fiberglass cloth in for us. So you just put the peel ply on, and you can take your little sponge or a dry sponge and sponge the peel ply in. And you want the peel ply smooth because that's the surface that you're going to get underneath. So you put your peel ply on just like that. And don't worry, it will come off if it's real peel ply. First time I did this, I just knew that this stuff was going to stick right to my fiberglass cloth and was never coming off, and I was going to have this god ugly mess, and it proved me wrong. And every time after that, I always think this stuff is not coming off. It's going to make a god ugly mess, and it's not coming off. But I think it will. So we just put the peel ply all over this, and we're done with the fiberglassing until it's all hardened. We've let the fiberglass cure overnight, so this is the proverbial next day. And now we're going to see if the peel ply really does come off. And yes, it does. Comes off and leaves a nice smooth surface here. It's not like the cloth itself, but it's smoother. Now what you'll have right here where we've staggered the layers is you'll see the 3 layers of fiberglass cloth. Now you can either sand that or fill that, and we'll probably do a little bit of both to try and get a nice smooth contour in here. So what we need to do pull all the peel ply off. Now I don't reuse peel ply. I don't know if you can or not, so I don't. Now the next big question is, will the canopy open? The answer to that is no, it won't. We tried it early this morning, and in fact it wouldn't come open. It was stuck real good. We were able to go under the lip with a very fine screwdriver and broke the seal. Remember, we had put car wax on here, so it wasn't solid. And then once we did that, the canopy came right open. Looking from the side, here's that lip, and it overhangs the canopy a good ½ inch. You see, here's the plexiglass right here, and we've got that lip, so when the canopy comes closed, it'll seal right in there. Nice and tight, perfect fit. Now, the last thing we have to do is on the very front, in this area here, all along the front, every 4 inches we've got to drill and pop rivet that. And that's per the instructions, and that just helps hold this plexiglass or the fiberglass down to the aluminum. Once that's done, then we need to fill those holes. We'll need to sand this. This is really very rough right now, and it sands easy, but you don't want to sand it too much. Remember, you've only got 3 layers of cloth in there. You're probably going to want to put a coat of epoxy resin or some kind of filler over top of this still so you can sand it and get a nice smooth surface. Now, on the very front, up in this area, like I said, you can still see the three layers, individual layers here. And what we're going to do is fill that with a filler. And what we use is micro balloons and epoxy resin. And we'll just fill that area and then sand it smooth. Same thing in the front here. Wherever we need it, we'll do a little filling and then sand it so it blends right in. Same thing in here. We've got a little bit of an indentation in here, and we'll just fill that with the micro balloon, and it'll be all one nice contour all the way around. This is only set 24 hours. It's still not cured, so you want to be careful. You can get under it and pop it right off, which is what you don't want to do. We've pulled all the masking tape off because we don't want it sticking to the aluminum. When we go to sand, we'll actually cover the metal and we'll cover the plexiglass with duct tape, and that'll protect the plexiglass or the aluminum while we're doing our sanding. So from here, we're going to go ahead and put our pop rivets in, mix up a little micro balloon, do a little filling, and let that set. Once we've done our sanding, we have to fill a little. Now, we've already sanded this down quite a bit, and we've put some micro balloon filler in. Now it's time to do the last little bit of filling, and that's to fill in some of the low spots. So what we're going to do is mix up another batch of micro balloon and do that filling, and we'll show you how we did that. We start our process by measuring out our epoxy resin. We're going to take 2 squirts of this, which is the resin itself, and 1 squirt of the hardener. And that's exactly what we need. Then we mix this up until it's thoroughly mixed. Once the resin's mixed thoroughly with the hardener, you want to take another cardboard cup. We use little wax paper cups because they work good, they're cheap, and you can just throw them away. And put about half of what you've just mixed into the other one. Okay. Now, to this we're going to mix the micro balloon. Now, what micro balloon is a very fine dust, when it looks like. It actually is little tiny glass balls. So when you're doing this, you want to be wearing a dust mask so you're not breathing this stuff in. And we start by just pouring a little bit of the micro balloon into the resin and mixing it. Now, it doesn't mix real fast, so it takes a while. And then you pour a little bit more in. Okay, and we keep adding the micro balloon little by little, and it depends on the consistency you want. Now, for filling, you want to get it to its almost the consistency that of like body putty, just a gummy mixture, something like bread dough. If it's too thin, what will happen is you fill it with it, it just comes right off. As you can see, this is about like icing right now, and that's too thin because you'd put it on something and it would just slide right off. And you'd be surprised how much you will end up making. It takes very little resin to mix with this stuff. They're getting a little thicker. You can see it's getting a little gummier, a little stringier, but not quite there yet. Now you get to the point where you just want to mix a little bit at a time. This mixture will actually start to get dry. You'll have so much microballoon mixed in with the resin. And that's what you want. You want it dry so when you put it someplace, it's not going to ooze out somewhere. Now, because this is epoxy resin, not polyester resin, we've got lots of time to work with this. If this was polyester resin, this stuff would start to harden up in 10-15 minutes. Where the epoxy resin will take several hours. Now, we prefer the microballoon over the standard Bondo body putty or something like this for several reasons. One, it's much lighter. You can actually work it like body putty when we get it mixed up here. And two, it seems to stick a lot better, and it has a little bit of a flexibility to it, and it won't crack and come out like Bondo or body putty would. Just about got enough in there. We actually want it a little extra dry. Okay, and there it's getting pretty dry. It's just one big lump now. It doesn't drip or anything. Pretty dry. And that's what we want. So, now we've got it mixed up. The next thing we need to do is take the little extra resin, and what we're going to do in the areas where we're going to apply the microballoon, we're going to dab a little of this extra resin on, because this microballoon is very dry and it actually won't stick to anything, it's so dry. So now we go back to the airplane and see where we want to fill. Now, to give you an example, right in here is a low spot, and I can rub my finger over and feel it, and you can actually see it right in there. Also, right in here, there's a little bit of a low spot where some of the cloth came off. And right in here, there's some low spots. And you can even see the roughness from sanding. So we're going to fill those in. Like I said, first we take a little piece of foam rubber and just dab a little resin on there. Just a little bit, just enough to make it wet. You don't want it running. All this is just to help the microballoon stick a little bit. Then we go ahead and, with a little squeegee, and put a little microballoon on it. And just like you would with any other filler, you just apply it. Now you can go ahead and put it on a little thick, because then you're sure you have plenty on, and you can sand it off later. So we're just applying this just like you would any other body filler. Applying it on, probably thicker than what we need, and that's okay because we'll just sand it off when we're all done. It sands fairly easy. It's just a little bit of an art to getting it on halfway smooth. go. We'll just leave that there and let it fill. Now, also what we can do, along up in here, there's some tiny little holes. And we can just apply a little resin to that. And a little bit of filler over those holes. And we'll just fill those holes. These are just like sort of little air bubble holes. And we want to make that as smooth as possible. And that'll fill those holes. So we'll do that wherever we have any little air bubble holes or little low spots, and we'll let this harden. Now, this micro balloon, once this starts to set up good, and even after it's hard, can actually be shaped. You can use a regular body putty shaper and shape the micro balloon once it's hardened up. So from here, we're just going to go all around, filling all these low spots. Okay, another one of those jobs that you can be doing while you're waiting for your epoxy resin to harden is working on your brakes. Now, for right now, to attach the brakes to the landing gear, there's one bolt that we can put in, and that is the bottom rear bolt. And we'll put the bolt through the brake attachment. And you want to put some washers on it. The other three bolts will get shims on them that will attach to a piece that holds the wheel pans on. So we don't want to put those bolts in. So for right now, we can put this bottom rear bolt in, and it's a number 4-5, as called for on the plans, and we'll tighten that on down. Next, we take our brake caliper and we go ahead and take the two bolts out that hold our brake shoes together. And we'll set the bolt aside. There's a washer on there. And we'll set our one brake shoe off to the side for right now. Now we can go ahead and mount our brake caliper onto the wheel. It's mounted with the brake line on the top. Now if you look sideways, there's a hole for the brake line. It should have come with a little plastic plug we've taken out, and a bleeder valve on the bottom. So we put that on. Next we want to go ahead and put the fitting that goes in the hole for our brake line, and we've gone ahead and put a little Loctite seal on the threads, and that's just to help the threads seal, and it also makes it a little vibration resistant. And you want to make sure you don't get any onto the inside the threads. So we'll start that by hand. Now, how we want this fitting to end up is pointing in a forward direction, because that's the way the brake line will come from. So once we get it down hand tight, we can go ahead and put a wrench on this, and very carefully. Remember, this is a pipe thread, so it gets tighter as you turn it in, so it does get to a point where it's not going to go any further. And we bring that around pointing forward now. From here, we can go ahead and put the wheel on and put our brake shoe back on, and that's just to make sure everything's lined up. This should move freely, so we can put our wheel back on, and then our brake shoe will go back in this way with the bolts that hold it back on. Looking at it from the back, here's your brake caliper, your brake disc. Now we're going to go ahead and put this other shoe in, and it'll go in right here, and then we'll put our bolts back in. Now when we're all done, these bolts will be safety wired in. We're not going to do that now, because I can almost guarantee you before this plane's ready to fly, these wheels will come off and on several times, but we want to at least put our bolts in. and snug them down, if for no other reason than to check, make sure the brakes aren't going to drag. And they're snug down and the wheels still turn, so we know our brakes aren't going to drag, and we've got a little bit of movement in here. From here we want to go ahead and run our brake lines. To run our brake lines, I found it's easiest to start at the fuselage. Now, people put their brake lines in different places, so this is just how we've run ours. We'll come out of the fuselage. Now, on the fuselage, we've marked where our wings will go, and we did that when the wings were on. So we'll come out of here with a slight curl, down along the bottom, bend it out slightly to keep it away from these bolt heads, to the back of the landing gear. We'll come down the back of the landing gear, around in front, up to the brake caliper. Now you want this little bit of a loop in here, and that's to give it play for the brake caliper to move back and forth. Some people even put flexible lines and bring the aluminum line down so far and clamp it and then bring a flexible line, and that's fine too. What you want to do is this brake caliper will move in and out as the shoes wear, so you have to allow for that. So to start up at the front, we'll have to go ahead and curl this first, and we're going to use a bending tool so we can get a nice crisp bend on it. And it'll go right like that. And we're actually going to trim a little bit of this off because we want this bend to be as small as possible. So we want to see just how much room we need for our flaring tool. And the rest we're going to trim off here. And we just use the regular tubing cutters to do this. Okay, and then we put our 618 and 619 flared fittings on. Okay, next we attach our flaring tool. And by now you should all be aware how to use flaring tools. Same thing you used in your tank and things like that. And go ahead and flare the end of this. And we're ready to attach that to the fuselage. Now you want to be careful not to kink your tubing when you're working with it. So we'll go ahead and attach this to the fuselage. Then we want to bring it down, and you can just very gently bend it on down in there. You actually have about 3 inches of room between the fuselage and where the wing starts, so you have plenty of room. As you bring this on down to the back of the landing gear leg, just like that. And you make it nice and neat. Neatness and originality takes into consideration. Now we're going to run it right down the back of the gear leg. Just like that. Until we get to the bottom of the gear. Okay. Then from here we're going to very gently make a curl and bring it right back around over top. Not too tight of a curl. Remember, you don't want to kink your aluminum tubing. And you bring it right on around until it meets the brake caliper. Just like that. Okay. From here, we'll go ahead and cut the tubing. We'll go ahead and mark it, cut it, put another fitting, and flare it. And there we go. Our brake line comes down in the back of the gear, underneath, around in front, plenty of clearance so it's not going to rub on anything, into our brake caliper itself. Now, what we like to do, we went ahead and took electrical tape and taped this right to the gear leg, or you can use wire ties or something, but you're going to want to secure this so it doesn't rub. And I wouldn't worry about it too much until after you've got your main gear fairings on here, because you want to make sure the gear fairings don't rub on here. And you're probably going to want to put some protection around the brake line too once you put your gear fairings on. But for right now, your brake line's on. It's still a dry system. There's no fluid in it yet. It's because we haven't mounted the rest of the system, but at least it's on, and this is something you can be doing while you're waiting for your fiberglass to harden. Once we've gone ahead and sanded the micro balloon off, the next thing we did was actually just mix up a batch of the epoxy resin, just like before, 2 parts resin to 1 part hardener. And we actually took all of our masking tape off and cleaned the edges up a little bit, and then we painted that resin over top of everything. And just a real light coat with a paintbrush. And what that does is really put a nice smooth coating on it. Now this will get sanded probably with some wet dry sandpaper, just enough to scuff it up, and put another coat of just resin to give it that final coat. And then it'll be ready for a real fine wet dry sanding just before painting. And then the canopy's done. We've sanded it off the best we can. We've filled our holes, our pop rivet. We've smoothed all the areas off that was maybe a little low from putting the fiberglass in, and we're real pleased with the way it came out. The next thing we like to do while the airplane's still in the jig, and in the jig it's still level both front to back and side to side, is go ahead and mount the horizontal and vertical stabilizer. Now the horizontal stabilizer, you basically just set it down onto the airplane. You've got the parts of your 611 that come up, and they're behind the rear spar of the stabilizer. You want to get it straight on the fuselage, and you do this by measuring from the tips of the stabilizer out to a center point on the aircraft. You can also do it by checking by using a level, and it should sit level. You just put a level across it, and that'll check level side to side. Now, your first attachment, once you've got it in place, is going to be up in the front, and that's where you've made those 2 little spacers. They're 1 inch by 2 inch spacers, 1/8 inch thick, and this is per the instructions. And they'll go under the forward spar, and that's so you can get over top of some rivet heads, basically. From there, you'll drill down through the forward spar, 1 bolt into the longeron, 1 into the angle that's underneath on the 610 bulkhead. So you drill those 2 bolts and get them in place. The next thing we need to do is get our incidents, and to do that we need a couple little spacers. Now remember, the fuselage is level this way and side to side. You need an 1/8 inch spacer that'll basically go right on your rivet line here. Then you'll need a 1/4 inch spacer that'll go back here. And again, you put your level on it. And now the stabilizer should be level. And if not, you can raise it and lower it. And we've got this one already leveled, and it's clamped in place. Once you've got it clamped in place, and you know your alignment side to side's all right and it's level each way, then you go ahead and drill your 4 bolts in the back. You can see under here, here's our little spacer, our 2" by 1" spacer. It went under here. And then here's our 2 bolts here. This one goes down through the forward spar, through the spacer, through the longeron. This one goes down through the forward spar, the spacer, and then underneath here, there's another angle. You can see right here, here's the hole for our trim tab cable. And there's the cable itself. It's not through the hole yet, but that'll run through here and then on through another hole back here. So you go ahead and drill these. Now, a trick to drilling these is use a long 1/8" drill bit, either a 5 or a 9" one, and do your drilling with that. Once you drill it, put a cleco in it, come over to the other side, do the same thing. Then take it off and back drill with your number 12 drill bit to open the holes up. And because it's hard to get a bit in here, it's a little closed. While it's off, you can open the holes in the longeron and everything else up, and then put it back in and put your bolts in. Next, we go ahead and we put our 1/8" shim right about where the rivet line is on the forward spar. We put our 1/4" shim on the rivet line for the rear spar, and we put our level on there. You can then adjust the height or lower the height of the stabilizer until that is level. Once it's level, you want to go ahead and clamp it. Now, you shouldn't have too much of a twist, but the one thing you may want to do is, after you've done that, is just lay it across this way and check level that way and make sure your stabilizer is level. Once you've got it this way, you want to clamp it real good and then come back in the back here and go ahead and drill and put your bolts in. Always deburr your holes, front and back. Okay, once it's through, we can then go ahead and put our bolt in, and just using a standard AN bolt as they call for on the plans. We go ahead and put each bolt in as we drill. That way there's no possibility of it moving. Right, then once our first bolt's in, we can go ahead and take our clamp off. Now, remember the beginning premise that George is a coward. I always check what I do. I'm not going to drill that other hole until I know I'm right, and it's still good that way. And it's still good that way. So we need to go ahead and put our clamp down on the bottom here so we can drill this top hole. And we're ready to just repeat what we did. We're going to go ahead and drill our top hole, put our top bolts in, then we'll come down and drill our 2 bottom holes, and our stabilizer's been drilled and bolted in place. Now, with all 4 bolts in place in the rear and all 4 placed in front, stabilizer is bolted down. Before we can mount the vertical stabilizer, one thing we want to do is make sure our back skin is trimmed up where we want, because once we put the stabilizer on, it's going to be a little more difficult. And you still may have to take the stabilizer off and trim it so it doesn't interfere with the rudder. But at least to start with, you want to try and get them all equal. And basically that's how the vertical stabilizer goes in place. we want to center it up, and the forward spar of the vertical stabilizer should match up with the forward spar of the horizontal stabilizer. And then you have a small plate, which is actually your I think it's a 621, that'll go in here like this. And it's just a plate that comes with the kit, and that's got to be drilled in place yet. There'll be some bolt holes drilled in the back, and these are just according to the plans. If you're building a tri-gear, you've also got your tie-down attachment that'll go on here like this, and you'll have to cut a small groove in your skin here at the bottom so it fits in nice and tight. The trick to getting this in place is just follow the instructions, and that is to first make sure it's straight up and down, and then make sure it's straight side by side, and you do that from measuring corner to corner, and make sure it's straight with the fuselage. Now, a lot of people say, oh, I'm going to put 2 degrees of angle to it so I won't need a trim tab. I suggest just put it straight. If you need trim it later, but don't start messing with your stabilizer. Do it just the way it calls for in the plans, and you'll be a lot happier. So from here, we're going to clamp this thing in place and start drilling our holes and checking our alignment and get our stabilizer attached. Okay, with our stabilizer in place, now this has been all drilled and bolted in, but how we got it to this point, we've got a tape measure going from the top all the way down to the horizontal stabilizer, and we've got one on the other side going down to the horizontal stabilizer. We also went ahead and put our F681 in place, and we clamped that all in place good. Then we put some clamps in the back here to hold the stabilizer, and it's a matter of centering the stabilizer up and then just start moving it back and forth enough to get it centered. And you want to move it a little bit and tighten your clamps and check your 2 tape measures until both are the same. Then you know it's straight up and down. The next thing we need to do is make sure that the rear spar was vertical, and we did that with a level, and we actually just put the level right on our brackets until our brackets were plumb. Now, the thing you have to be careful of is you can actually bow this right here a little bit, so your brackets will be out of alignment. So you want to take a straight edge of some kind and make sure you still have a straight between your brackets, that you haven't bowed the rear spar. Then with your 681 in place, we need to get the front placed. Now you try and put it in the center as much as possible. Then what we did was actually take a tape measure, and we went from our horizontal stabilizer right on over to our tip like this, and we did that on both sides. And when we got it so it was equal, and actually right dead in the center we put a little pen mark, and we did it both sides. When we got those sides equal, then we knew it was centered. And we checked that a couple ways. We checked it like that, and then we came from here out to the ends, and there's a couple different places you can measure. And we got it good centered. And then we started drilling, and the first thing we did was drill a few holes in our forward spar of our vertical stabilizer for where there'll be rivets going. And from there we just went ahead and drilled the 4 bolt holes for the forward spar, and then came around to the rear spar. Now, we kept our tape measures in place, and every time we drilled a hole and put a cleco in it, we checked our tape measures, make sure nothing moved. And we just worked through all our bolts like that. Then we took it off. We had to take it off to do the riveting of the 681 to the forward spar. And of course you want to deburr your holes and everything. And then we had to come around to the back and cut the groove for the tie-down ring. And like I said, what you need to do is take a straight edge and put on your mounts, and make sure that you haven't put a bow in there, or you'll have to realign your rudder a little bit. And they're just barely touching all 3 points, so that's good. Now, down on the bottom here, We've gone ahead and drilled our 2 holes, and these are for number 4 screws or bolts. And then we've put our tie down in. Now if you're building a tail dragger, of course you'll just put another bolt in here, but for the tricycle gear you've put your tie down ring. Right in here we had to cut a groove so the ring would fit back in, and then we put our 2 number 3 bolts through. Now the only thing we've got left to do is right up in here, there's a piece of angle goes in here, and it gets drilled to the longeron forward of the rear spar of the vertical stabilizer, and then will get drilled through the vertical stabilizer and bolted in, and then the vertical stabilizer's in place. Now we still have our rulers stretched across, and we check them periodically. Every time we do something we check and make sure we haven't moved it. We've also gone ahead and pulled our trim cable through, our trim tab cable, and you'll find that you'll have to take the nut and the lock washers off, and you'll even have to pull the little black rubber gasket down like this to get the nuts over it. So we've pulled that on through the holes, and just to get it there, we'll just push it there out of the way. When we go to put our elevators on, then we'll feed this through our elevators. But from here, there it is, both the vertical and horizontal stabilizers on. Of course now the vertical stabilizer had its little cap, and this is left off right now for 2 reasons. When we go to install our radios, there'll be an antenna come out of here for our VOR and our glide slope, and we'll also cut a small hole in this to mount our strobe light. So we're not going to put this on right now. One thing you can be doing, and it's another one of the little time-saving things, while you're doing other things, what you can be doing is micro-ballooning the little crack that's probably in here between your aluminum and your fiberglass. And this is one of those little jobs that you can be doing while you're doing other things. You'll put a little micro-balloon in, sand it off, let it sit a couple days, whatever. So we can be working on this. The airplane's still in the jig at this point. We're going to go ahead and finish mounting the gear. The nose gear is off right now just because of being in the jig. But we're going to go ahead and pull the jig out now and get ready to mount the engine. Now we've got the plane off the jig. Our horizontal and vertical stabilizer are mounted. Now to get the plane off the jig is really easier than what you think. All you need to do is place some wood under the main tires, and then pull whatever padding you had between the airplane and the jig out, and then just slide the jig out from under it. It's a simple job. Now we're ready to mount the engine. The first thing we had to do was put some cement blocks on the engine, and that was to keep the nose down. We've also got a sawhorse under the back of the tail, and that's just used to help support the airplane, because right now we're very tail heavy. We've got our engine, and we've got a hook to a hoist on the ceiling. Now the trick to mounting this engine is you don't want to be horsing the engine around to match the airplane. Right now the engine probably weighs as much as the airplane. So once we get the engine up to the height we want, we'll let it hang and we'll get it situated. And the next thing we'll do is actually position the plane to match the engine. We'll go ahead and move it forward and back, side to side. We'll even lift the tail and lower the tail so that the engine mount itself matches up with the engine. And then from there we'll start mounting our engine. Now that we've got the engine in position, we start with our lowered mounts. Now we're going to be mounting a dynafocal engine here. For those of you that will be using conical engines, it'll be a lot easier. The dynafocals are a little tricky. We're using the rubber lowered mounts that we got from VANS. They're actually a 3-piece mount. They come with an inner collar that's hollow that your bolt actually goes through. And then you have your 2 halves. One half's bigger than the other. Now, how this works is on the top, the big half will go against the engine, and the small half goes on the back. Now, on the bottom, we'll reverse these. The small half goes against the engine, and the big half goes on back. So we always start with the top. Now, mounting these things is a little bit of a trick or an art, but we've got a way we've been working real well. What we do is once we've got our engine in position, we start with the tops, and we'll do the two top mounts. And what we're going to do is just get the leeward mount in position and a bolt through and just enough threads on the nut to hold it in place. And we'll get the two top ones. From there we'll go to the two bottom ones, not worrying about tightening them up or even getting the mounts in position, just worrying about getting the bolts through at first. Then we'll rotate around, tightening all the bolts. Now, something you may also want to do, especially on a new engine, is check on your flywheel. Now, some of these come and they're fairly loose. Now, this one's pretty tight, so you just got to be careful if you're going to be moving the engine with this that it doesn't come off in your hands. And from there, we're going to go ahead and start with the left side top mount. We start by gently moving the engine away from the mount and putting the larger of the two mounts between the engine and your engine mount. Then from the back side, we're going to take our bolt, and we actually want to use the smaller of the bolts. You'll get 4 bolts, and 2 will be a 43 and 2 will be a 44 length, and you want the smaller ones on the top with a washer, the big washer, through your mount, through your bushing, and then from here you want to go through your other mount and through the hole in the engine. And then just put your nut on, no washer at this time, just enough threads to hold it. Now, I don't know if you can see right here, we've got this towel, and I put all my parts that I want on the towel. I don't lay them in the fins of the engine for them to fall down and get lost. I always put a towel. Now, this was the easy one. Now we come around to the other side and do the same thing. Again, we put our leeward mount in with the big mount up on top against the engine. Take our other bolt. Now, the reason this is so difficult is these holes do not go straight. They actually go in and down. The top ones go in and down, and the bottom ones go in and up. So they're not real cooperative. Put that in there. And try and hit the other hole in the engine mount. Now you'll find you'll have to horse these mounts around to get them in the socket some, and that's just the way it is. Okay, with a little persuading and a little patience, there it goes. Now, what we had to do to do this, we had to work this mount a little bit and push it and pry it and push it and pry it. Actually, I had to take a rubber mount and just tap it a little bit to get them down in the cups. Now, we've only got 2 or 3 threads on each bolt. And that's all we want for now, because the engine's still movable, and we have to lift the engine up to get the bolts, or get the mounts under the bottom ones. So now we start on the bottom ones, and again, we'll go over to the left-hand side, and we'll do the bottom left-hand side one. Now, before we can work on the left side, we've got to come around here to the right side and slowly lift the engine up and put this mount in this right side, because once we get a bolt in there, we're not going to be able to get these mounts in here. So we just set it in there for right now. It shouldn't fall out. Then we come around to the left side. Now with the smaller of the 2 mounts in the right side bottom, we slowly lift the engine and get the mount in the left side bottom. Just like that. Okay. Then we get the longer of the bolts with the washer on it, put it through the bigger rubber mount, through our bushing. Now, this is where it gets a little tricky. between the mount and the engine, we have to put another washer, another one of the big washers. And that's to give you some spacing so your mount clears the sump. So we put those in there and put that all through and try and hit the hole. Now it's not going to work real easy, and it's not going to be cooperative, but you can get it in there. Help you get it in there. Give it a little tap. Okay, now we've got that bolt started fairly well, but it's not in all the way. So we're going to go ahead and see if we can get this other one started. Again, we've got the smaller of the lured mounts already in place. We're going to put our bigger one with the washer on the bolt through. And then also put the mount in, the other washer in, between the lured mount and the engine itself. And then try and get this whole conglomeration to go through the hole in the engine. Now, the reason it's not going in, one is the front of the engine is just a little high. So we're going to try and get this one started here. And we're going to lower the engine down just a tad. That seemed to help. And see if we can just put a wrench on it, turn it in the hole here. Okay, and that's starting to go in. Now when you're doing this, be careful that you don't pinch your wiring harness or interfere with if you've got a new engine from VANS, with the oil line that goes for your constant speed. And from here we just want to get all 4 bolts in now. And this is just going to take just a little moving of the engine side by side, up and down, to get these bolts in. Now we've got all the bolts in, and it just takes a little persuading. Like I said, the trick is to have the plane matching the engine so you're not trying to horse the engine around. At this point the engine's still hanging here. We've got all the bolts in, but our mounts are not tight. We've only got a couple threads on each one. So what we want to do now is start going around to each one and start tightening them down. And it's just going to take a wrench on both ends and just start tightening them on in now. Again, we'll start at the top ones. And what we want to do is get enough threads so that the nut is completely threaded in, because we've got to take this nut off here in just a second. So once we get 3 or 4 good threads on each nut, like we've did this one, then we go to phase 2. Now the bottom ones are the really tricky ones. It's hard to get a wrench in. But if you want to mount your engine, you're just going to have to figure out how to do that. Okay, now once that's done, we can go to the final phase. The engine's still being held with the cable. We're going to one by one back the nuts off of one bolt. The reason for that is we have not put our washers in between the nut and the engine, And you're going to need to do this because you want to tighten this nut down until you've compressed the mount and that inner sleeve bottoms out. Then you've got a hole in the bolt that a cotter pin goes through. And without some washers in here, you're not going to be able to do that. And actually it's going to be a little trial and error just how many washers you need. So I suggest you start with 1 or 2. And we're going to start with 2. And tighten it down till it bottoms out and see how your cotter keyhole lines up. Now the reason we're doing it this way is initially you'd never get those washers on there because we were just barely able to get a couple of threads on the bolt as it was. Now you'll see your mount starting to swell up, and that's fine. You just keep tightening it down until you bottom out on that inner collar. Now you may want to check, and we're not bottomed out yet, and it looks like we're going to need another washer. And yeah, we're going to need one more washer on there. So we take it off, put another washer on, and start all over. And I think you'll probably find that in the bolts they don't give you enough washers. They give you some of the great big ones that you can put on back here. But really what you need is a few extra of these big little ones right up in here. As soon as we get this done, we'll give you a close-up to show you what I mean about the hole in the bolt with a cotter pin. And you can feel when this thing bottoms out, it just doesn't want to turn anymore. Okay, come around, we'll show you what we mean. And what we're trying to get right here on the bolt is this hole to line up with the nut, so when we put our cotter key in, we've got a nice fit just like that, and it's not going to slip out. Now we'll have to turn the bolt a little bit once the cotter pin's in to get it down in there all the way. There, it dropped in. And we'll go ahead and turn it so that the long end of the pin wraps around the face of the bolt. Like so. And that one's done. From here we'll go around one bolt at a time, adding our spacer washers, tightening it down till the bolts bottom out on that inner collar, putting our cotter pin in, bending the long one up over top of the bolt, and our engine's mounted. At that point we can go ahead and let the pressure off the hoist here. We can also take the cinder blocks off the front wheel, and our engine's on, and we can go to the next step. Before we can start the placement of the cowling, first we need a reference point, and our reference point is our spinner. The spinner comes like this. Now this is a constant speed spinner, and there's a couple of parts to it. First you've got the spinner itself. Then you've got the front spinner plate, which goes up in this section of it. Then you've got the rear spinner plate and a reinforcing plate. Now if you've got a fixed pitch prop, you don't have the reinforcing plate, and your rear spinner plate will come all drilled and cut like this, and that's all you need to do except to mount your prop extension and then mount your spinner plate on, and then your cowling will have a reference point from the spinner plate on out. Now for a constant speed prop, however, there's a couple things you have to do. One, you have to attach your reinforcing ring to the spinner plate, and then you have to cut the center of the spinner plate out to make this hole, because the prop itself will actually go through here, and this gets bolted onto the prop. With a constant speed propeller, there is no prop extension. And we'll show you what we mean when we're done making the plate here. Also on your constant speed prop, your forward spinner plate has already been drilled in that it'll mount right on the prop itself also. So it'll look a little bit different than the fixed pitch prop. So the first thing we need to do on the spinner plate is locate the center hole here that is going to be cut out. Okay, this ring here. Now, doing that's not too bad if you just take a little time and think about it. First we need to draw some lines according to the plans, and what they recommend is to draw lines through the center of the holes, like draw a line through the center of this hole down to the center of that hole. Well, I have trouble finding the center of holes, so another way is to draw a line from the outside of this hole to the inside of that hole, and it'll accomplish the same thing. You can see the line that goes right down through here, and we did the same thing. We came around here, drew outside of this one, inside of that one, outside of this one, inside of that one, and that gave us our starting points. Now from there we measured from the ring out to the edge 2.5 inches, and we did that on all of them, 2.5 inches, and made a mark. And again, that's from this edge here out along that line. We found on this one that 2.5 inches didn't quite work. We actually needed 2 and 7/16. Then from there you can place your ring on those marks and actually get it centered up and get your ring centered. And when all your marks are showing, you know your ring is centered. And then you just draw inside here, and that's what gets cut out. Now also, while you have that centered up like that, you could draw 4 little circles here. Of course, that'll get drilled, and actually you can back drill through this later, so you don't really need to drill those holes. But what you're trying to do is get that center cut out, and that'll get cut out, and we'll actually cut that out on a drill press using a hole cutter. And how we do that, since there is no center, we'll clamp this down on a board. We'll draw these lines again to get our center position in the wood, and with it clamped on here, we'll use the wood as our center stay and cut that out. From here, our next job is then to figure out the hole pattern on our reinforcing ring. Now what we did on that was basically the same. We had 4 holes, so we drew our lines from the outside of one to the inside of the other, outside of one, inside of the other, and with that gave us a center point. We were then able to take a ruler and measure and we found that from the one line to the center point was 3 and 5/8 inches. So we went 3 and 5/8 inches around, and we were able to get our third line here. What that allowed us to do is then clamp this onto this board, because we're using the board as our center. Take our compass, and we would need some rivets that'll go 2-inch spacing along here, and according to the book this should be I think it's 5/16 of an inch from the edge up, 2-inch spacing along here. So what we did, we got our compass, put it in the center here, got our 5/16 measurement, and drew a line all the way around on the aluminum, 5/16. Then we were able to take our ruler and do our 2-inch spacing right on around, and we've got our rivet pattern now, 2 inches. Then there's an outer ring of rivets that should correspond to the center of these 2 inches, so it'll be more than 2 inches. So again, we took our compass and opened it up to 5/16 from the outer edge, drew our line all the way around, and then we were able to, in the center of where we had 2 marks, which are 2 inches apart, put another mark 1 inch apart, and then take a line from the center through that mark to that outer ring, and that was our other rivet spacing. And we did that to all the points all the way around. And that's how we ended up with all our rivet spacing marks, 2 inches apart on the inside, and split the difference on the outside all the way around. So now we'll go ahead and drill those out, and then we'll be ready to cut the center hole out of this, place this on here, drill these together. This then gets mounted on the constant speed prop, which then has to be mounted on the engine. And once your reinforcing ring has been drilled, you can go ahead and use it as a drill pattern, drill through into your spinner hub, clecoing as you go. And last but not least, the 4 mounting holes are drilled out, using the reinforcing ring as a template. Now once the center hole has been cut out, you can see it'll go together like that. Your reinforcing ring will go on the inside. We're ready to deburr, clean up all the edges. All the edges are still rough. Deburr all the holes. Go ahead and paint both of these, and it's ready to rivet together. Once we've riveted the plate together with our reinforcing ring, we go ahead and mount it on our constant speed prop. And there's just the 4 bolts. Now there's a spacer that's underneath here, and the bolts and the nuts and the spacers all come with the constant speed prop. So there's this plate, and then behind here there's about a 1/4 of an inch spacer. We didn't torque these down because this will probably come off before we're done to put plate nuts along the edge and everything. But you can see that the plate is on, and if we stand that prop up here, You can see we've got the rear plate and then the front plate's been put on. And the front plate just has the 4 holes in it and the big hole in the center. And these are number 4 bolts with holes in the head. When we're all done with this, these will all be safety wired together. But for right now, we're just going to put them on. So now the prop is ready to be mounted. Now remember, if you're using a wood prop with a prop extension, you don't have to go through all this. You can just go ahead and mount the prop extension. But because of the constant speed prop, we have to mount this before we can work on our cowling. Now, a couple things else we got to talk about. One, in the front of your engine, right in the center of the crank here, as you can see, there's a plug here. Now, if this is a new engine from VANS, that plug, if you're going to be using a wooden prop or a fiber prop, something other than a constant speed prop, we leave this plug in. For the constant speed prop, this is where the oil comes to rotate the blades. So we have to knock that plug out. Remember, you only knock the plug out if you're using a Hartzell constant speed prop. Now, to do this, it's very unceremonious. You actually just take a punch and punch a hole in it. And pry that plug out. Now also on the new engines, be aware that more than likely there's going to be oil behind this plug. So I'm going to put a little stool up here with a little thing to catch it. Now once the hole's in it, you can take a screwdriver and put in that hole to start prying it out. Open the hole up a little bit more. Alright, here comes the plug, and here comes the oil. Plug is out, and the oil will drip here for a little while. Now what you want to do is let this oil drain out. And what we'll probably do is, pick the tail up a little bit or something, try and get some more of this oil out. We'll let it run a while, and then we're ready to mount our prop on. Okay, we've drained all the oil out, we've cleaned all inside here, so we're ready to put the prop on. Now, you'll notice that there's 4 extruding pins here and 2 that aren't here. So these are sort of indexes for the prop, so the prop will only go on one way. There's also a little rubber collar that'll go inside here that'll seal this. Now, the prop is kind of difficult because you can only get a few turns on each bolt, and you got to work your way all the way around to do all the bolts. And like I said, again, this prop will come off because we haven't got to the point where we're ready to put it on permanently. One thing you may want to do, though, is go ahead and put the belt for your alternator on, just in case you decide not to take the prop off. The only reason you'd need to take it off is to put this belt for this alternator on, and we're going to do that. But basically all you do is hold the prop up, start turning your bolts in one at a time, and you just work your way around. You can only get about 2 or 3 turns on each one, and you got to slowly draw the prop in. So we're going to go ahead and get the belt for the alternator, put that on, then Becky's going to come over and give me a hand holding this prop because it is a little on the heavy side. Okay, and like I said, just with the constant speed prop, it's a little meticulous, but you just have to work your way around because you can only get about 2 or 3 turns on each bolt. Now, these will get safety wired in with a number 40 safety wire. But for right now, like I said, just in case we have to take them out again, we're not going to safety wire these in yet. But now the prop's on. We'll leave the plastic covering on it just to protect the blades. And we're ready to start mounting the cowling, which you start with the top part. Now, the first thing you need to do to start the procedure with the top of the cowling, first we've got to put the hinges on. Now, the hinges are important because the cowling attaches to it, but it also gives us a place to set the cowling down on while we're doing the fitting process. The hinges are the larger hinges that come in the kit using the 1/8 inch pins. Now, the 1/8 inch pins will be replaced on the top part of the hinge later on because they're too thick to pull in and out on the curve. They'll be replaced with a smaller pin, but for right now we want to go ahead and leave the 1/8 inch pin in. To fit these hinges, you want to just refer to drawing 31, and it's section DD of the drawing. And it'll show you where to fit them. Basically, there's a small piece on the passenger side on the top that curves, and there's a gap, and the gap is so you can pull these pins in and out, and then a larger piece that goes on around. You also want to shim these hinges. Your cowling is approximately 1/8 of an inch thick, so you have to be able to drop this hinge down off of the skin 1/8 of an inch. So you have to shim under here, and we actually had to shim, I think it was using some 062 that we had cut out. But you have to do measurements and you know, figure it out on each individual airplane. But you want to shim it down both on the top and the sides, so when your 1/8 inch cowling goes against the hinge, it has a nice flush fit with the skin. So once you've got your hinges on, there's a measurement that you want to put in that goes from the bottom of the cowling up the side, and it's 17 3/4 inches, and that'll mark where approximately the side of the top part of the cowling will come down to. Now, when we first fitted our top cowling on, it just barely made that mark, but once we do some trimming and we get the cowling off of the sides and off of the top and drop down onto the hinge, it'll come below that mark and it'll give us some trimming line. Next, the tape that's on here is 1 inch masking tape, and it is put on as tightly as we can get it with the contour of the skin all the way down. That'll give us a 1 inch line off that when our cowling is sitting on top here, we can measure from the edge of the tape out and find this edge. So we've put that masking tape all the way around, and that's just to give us a 1 inch guideline. And I mean, you could use 2 inch or whatever, we just use the 1 inch tape. So now the back part of the fuselage is ready to receive the cowling. Then we have to come up to the front. Now, like I said before, the plans call for no more than 1/4 of an inch gap between the cowling and your spinner plate, and no less than an 1/8 inch. So we've used an 1/8 inch, some 1/8 inch paperboard here as our shim. And the reason for that, if we shim it and we get it fitted to an 1/8 inch and maybe our edge in the back isn't too clean, we can file or trim it back a little bit more to clean our edge up, and it'll give us some leeway in here. If we start with 1/4 of an inch shim, we have no play to move the cowling back. So we'll start with an 1/8 inch. We'll also put a little shim up on top of the spinner plate, and that is because the cowling should be an 1/8 inch higher than the spinner plate. And this is all covered in the book. So now with our shims in place and our hinges in place, we're ready to set the cowling on the top and start some preliminary marking and measuring. We've set the cowling on top. Now we've cut some little pieces of aluminum out of some, I think it was 062, and just clecoed it on, and we've got 2 of these. And what this is for is to hold the cowling above the spinner, and you can see we've got our little 1/8 inch shim in here. So we've got one here and we've got one on the other side. And that held the front of the cowling onto the position on the spinner plate. we've got our spacers in here and we've got it butted up against there. Then in the back, we've gone ahead and placed it on, pulled our cowling down to that 17 3/4 inch line on this side, and then we had to push it down and pull it on the other side to go ahead and get it down to that line. Now, all this is just very basic stuff, so you don't have to worry if it's not perfectly there. You want to try and get as close as possible. As you can see, our cowling comes way back beyond the tape mark right now. So what we want to do is, as long as you don't see the tape, you can trim 1 inch, because the tape is a 1-inch tape. We've gone ahead and marked about 3/4 of an inch line all the way across the cowling right here, and you can see it right here. And that's just to get it trimmed back enough that we can see our tape to get our 1-inch measurement. So our first cut is going to be actually just to cut this back part off enough that we can see the tape. We're going to cut the cowling off with the same thing that we cut our canopy with, just a little cut-off wheel, and same exact method. Okay, and there the first trim is done, and we're ready to put it back on the airplane and start our second marking. Now, remember, it's always better to mark a little at a time and have to trim a couple times than to cut too much at the first cut and then be sorry. Actually, what we'll do is trim it very close, and then like the last 32nd or 16th of an inch, we'll actually sand the edges to get it where we want it. So we're ready to put it back on anyway and start some more marking. With the cowling put back in place, now we've got our shims up on the spinner plate here. We've even put some small clamps. Now these clamps aren't very tight, as you can see. They're just a little pressure to hold everything tight up here. Now back in here, we can see our tape here, but we can't quite see it up in the top part here. And so what we're going to do now is try and make another mark starting about here up over, just to trim this very top part back so we can see our tape all the way around. This is before we do our final marking. So we're going to trim just this top part up in here. You want to make sure that up in the front here that this is down good on the spinner plate, and you want to make sure that it's conforming to the spinner plate nice, and you're not got it cockeyed a little bit before you do your marking. Okay, second trimming's done. I can see my tape all the way around now. I've put it back in. I've got all my shims in the front in place. I've got my little clamps in place. I've pulled it down to my 17 3/4 inch mark, and I've got a little Cleco side grip clamp holding it here, as on the other side. So now we're ready to start marking 1 inch from the edge of the tape onto the top of the cowling for our final cut, and then that cut will be off of that line just a little bit, or just right on the line, because remember, we've got a little bit of play up in front here because we only have an 1/8 inch shim. So we're probably going to just barely cut right on the line here, but we'll just start taking a ruler and making 1 inch marks all the way along here until we're all the way across, and then take a ruler, draw our line, and then that'll be our next trimming line. Okay, this cut went a lot better. We've actually dropped off of the fuselage now, and we're down onto our hinge, and we've We can push it down on the hinge and see that our shimming's done real well. Still just a couple places where we're touching, so we'll go ahead and mark them with a pen, and so it'll drop down all together. Now these places are just so fine that we won't cut these with a cutoff wheel. We'll go ahead and get a sander and start sanding now to move it back and get it just the way we want it. And with a little sanding on this back edge, you can get a real nice fit. And we've sanded, marked a little bit, and sanded, and marked a little bit. Got a real nice fit. We've got about a 3/16 of an inch gap now by our spinner. Remember, we started out as an 1/8, and from sanding and fitting it back, we've got it out to 3/16, and that's what you want, between an 1/8 and a 1/4. From here, what you want to do is go ahead and drill and cleco, starting in the center and working your way out the canopy down with 1 inch spacing into that hinge. And once you've got that, then you're ready to start fitting the bottom part of the cowling. And then once it's all clecoed on, it's pretty tight, pretty rigid. While it's in this position, we can get to underneath and start doing some measuring for our oil door. Now, we've got our oil door all marked here, and where we like to put ours is about 2 1/4 inches from the edge out, and from the back it's about 7 1/2 inches up, and the door itself is 6 3/4 by 6. 6 3/4 this way, 6 that way. Now, something you have to be careful of is, remember, you're going to have engine baffle in here somewhere, so you don't want to move it too far forward or it'll be on the wrong side of the engine baffle. And you just want to do some preliminary measuring so that the oil door goes so you can get in where your oil is. And we've already cut this out, and you can see the doors all cut out. The next thing you need to do is make a little aluminum fairing, and it looks like this. Now, what this is just a piece of 025 aluminum. It'll give you 7/8 of an inch overlap on the cowling side and 1/4 of an inch overlap on the door side. And then down in the corner, you got to leave a little bit more material because you've got your cam locks will go in there for attaching the door on. So this goes inside, and it's pretty easy to get in there. Once you get it in there, just put a whole lot of clamps all the way around the edge and drill and cleco that on. Now, once you've got that on, you need to make up a hinge. Now, the top of the hinge is 9 1/2 inches long, and the bottom of the hinge is I think 6 1/2 inches. Let's see here. Yes, 6 1/2 inches, and that'll correspond with the door itself. So the short piece goes on the door, the long piece goes underneath the cowling, and this is all per the instructions. There's nothing fancy about this, but that'll get your oil door for you. Once you've got that cut in, it's time to start on the bottom. Now, before we can start fitting the bottom part of the cowling, there's a couple things we have to do. One, remember this is a tri-gear, so you've got your nose gear in the way. So you have to mark on the cowling and cut out an area to allow the nose gear to fit in there. Now, what we did, we took our air scoop and we drew a center line on here and just rough fitted the air scoop on there and drew a line around it. Then I cut a hole, and this hole's about 11 inches wide and about 12 inches high, and that's to allow the cowling to go back in, and this is just an area for the nose gear to come through. Now, this whole area here will get cut out eventually once the air scoop's been put on, but for right now we just need to get some room for the tri-gear to go in. Now, if you're doing a tail dragger, you're going to have to cut out an area in the corner possibly where your gear comes out of your engine mount. So you're just going to have to fit it up in there. Don't cut any more material out than you want to replace. So just be cautious on how much material you do take out. Once we've done this, we're ready to start our preliminary fitting. Before we get started on the bottom, remember this edge here has not been trimmed yet, and it gives you just a little bit of a overhang here. I mean, it gives you a little material that you can cut off, so don't cut that off right yet. You can always cut it off later. We started fitting our cowling just like we did the top part, and we just sort of fitted up in there and got a measurement. Now what we did first was actually cut the bottom off. You can cut the bottom off and get it around this bend right here so that the cowling overlapped the side and actually overlapped up in here, or butted up in here. It was a little low, but it overlapped the side, and we got the bottom cut so we could get it back, start working our way back. And what I mean by that is we got the bottom cut off. We can fit it up in here. Okay. And it was hung back. So once we got the bottom, we started working our way up. We started trimming this edge here and working our way up. Now it was still overlapped here. Okay. So we fit this, and we want to get a nice tight fit up in the front here. Once we got this pretty close and we got this edge here straight, we went ahead and straightened this edge out and trimmed it so that they would butt real nice. Okay. Once that was done, this bottom or this back edge here, we could start cutting and trimming that, and we cut and trimmed that until we pulled the cowling all the way back in and got a nice fit. Okay, and it takes a little work. You got to do one side at a time, and it's just like with the top. You don't want to cut a whole lot. You start to where you're sanding it, and you're pulling it up, and you want to get a nice fit down in here where the spinner is going to be, and we just work our way right on up. Once we got that done and we got a nice fit, we went ahead and took the cowling off. And the next thing we did was cut our hinge that went under here. Now the hinge is just the standard hinge. It's the 2257 hinge, and it'll just fit half of it up in here and half of it down. Now once this edge is trimmed to where you want it, you can just clamp your hinge up in there and drill and cleco it on. Now the hinge has a hinge pin, and you want to leave plenty of slack on the hinge pin for a couple reasons. One, the hinge will go past this hinge right here, and the instructions even say you might want it to go through the firewall, so it holds the back of this. The other thing is you have to leave enough out here in the front for a handle and some kind of locking mechanism to pull the pin out. So we went ahead and fit our hinge pins on both sides, and then we were ready to put our bottom cowling back on and start our final drilling. Now once this hinge has been drilled and clecoed into the top part of the cowling, and like I said, we'll talk more about this hinge pin, but just leave lots of pin. You're ready to set the cowling in there and drill and cleco the bottom part on. Now when doing this, there's a couple things that you want to do. The most important thing is that you don't want this hinge under stress just sitting on the ground. And what I mean by that is, when drilling this, don't cram this thing together if you don't have a good fit along this edge. For one thing, it'll eventually wear on the hinge pin, it'll wear on the hinges, and it'll make it terribly difficult to get the pin out. So when you fit this up, you want a nice tight fit, but not under pressure. I mean, you shouldn't have to sit here and push this stuff together, you should be able to just duct tape it in place and it should match up real nice. So you want to work these edges, both the top edge and the side edge and the bottom edge, so that you just duct tape this all in place and it sits right where you want it. So the next thing is just to go ahead and stick the cowling on. And drill and cleco it in place. Now we've already drilled this one, but we can put a couple clecos in. Now, how well of a fit you get will depend entirely on how slow you do this entire process. Time and patience is the real key to fitting this cowling in. Now, it won't fit completely the way you want it in all places. It's fiberglass and a little tweak here, or you know, it didn't quite cure right there, and some edges or some seams may not meet up just right. That's okay. A little filler, a little sanding, and you'll never know that. But the key to getting it fitted nice, to get a nice seam along these edges, is patience. And don't be cutting off any more material than you want to be fiberglassing back in. And really, it's a two-person job, maybe a three-person job, to hold it in place and mark a little bit here and sand it off, and it comes together, and it's a pain in the butt, but it's very rewarding once it's done and it's done right. It took us maybe 4 nights of a lot of work to get this cowling fitted up right. Now back on this hinge pin, like I said, you don't want the cowling under stress. You want it so it sits in its place naturally. The hinge pin that runs through here, like I said, runs all the way back and actually overlaps the side hinge back in here. It'll come all the way back this hinge and overlap the side hinge here, and it locks this in now, except we missed. But if we pull it out, lock it in, it catches that hinge and it locks it in there. The next thing we have to do is some kind of locking for this pin. Now there's a couple ways you can do it. You can bend a little loop here and a piece that goes inside and latch it in here somewhere. You can latch it, safety wire it. What we're going to do here is actually we took and bent it and put a loop on it, and we'll put a plate nut inside the cowling here, and this will get a little stainless steel screw, and it'll screw that right in there. When we paint the airplane, this part of the hinge pin will get painted with the airplane, so it'll all match up, and a little stainless steel screw will lock that right in there. Now this is important because in flight this thing will just do this, and it'll just vibrate right on out into your prop, and I actually cut your prop clean off. And so you want to figure out some way that you like to lock this pin. Same thing with this, there's a little extruded hinge that'll go in here before long, and that little extruded hinge will have a pin on it too, and you want to have some way of locking that in also. Now the reason for the extruded hinge in here is there's a lot of pressure trying to pry this cowling apart here, so the extruded hinge doesn't have the bent eyes in it, so it'll take a little more pressure. And with that extruded hinge, put plenty of rivets. Don't shortchange on the rivets. Now as you can see back in here, there's a little gap in here, and that's just as good as this cowling would fit up. And I'll actually just do a little fiberglassing, and I'll fiberglass that close, and when I'm done nobody will ever tell the difference. So here's the cowlings all fitted on now. The next thing we have to do is fit our air scoop. Now the air scoop starts with the basic scoop that comes from VANS. It's got the hole in it. Now it doesn't have this cutout. What you want to do is get a center line, mark center here, mark center down here, and cut a notch out. Now this is just a beginning notch. This is the notch where the landing gear will go. and the landing gear actually ends up in here. You have to allow room. How this cowling comes off is when you pull all the pins out, the first thing it has to do is drop down. It has to drop down so it can clear the spinner. And so it can drop down, you have to have a longer notch in here so the landing gear can drop up in there. Now, there's a couple things you can do to cover that notch. You can put a plate with some screws or something once it's on to cover that notch. In the instructions they show you how to build a little build-up area on the front of the landing gear that comes up that fills that up, and we'll probably do that, and we'll show you how to do that later. But for right now, we just want to cut this notch. Now, the nose gear will actually be fiberglassed, and so we may have to widen this notch to the thickness of the fiberglass. But essentially, it'll just come under here like this and fit right up in there. And this will be another one of those jobs where you're going to have to fit it and clamp it and get it to where you like it, and then drill it and cleco it in place, and then take the cowling off the airplane to fiberglass this in and do some final work. So the next thing you want to do is get that notch cut in. We still haven't cut this area out in here, and we won't until we've got this clecoed on and we know exactly how much of an area we want to cut out. And then we'll cut that out and fiberglass this all in and make this one piece. Now we've clecoed the air scoop onto the lower part of the cowling. Now there's a couple things to consider in placing that air scoop. One is the scoop is got a curve to it, so you want to try and match it up to the bottom half of your cowling as well as possible. The other consideration is the placement according to the instructions if you're using VANS carb air box. So you need to find a happy medium there. Now with it clecoed on, you can see it looks like this. Now once it was clecoed on, we took and drew a line with the magic marker all the way around it. That showed us where it went. Then I reached inside, and you can do that from the back side, and marked the inside. Now the reason for the inside mark, as you can see right here, is to know where to cut this out to accommodate room for your carb air box, whether it be VANS carb air box or your own. You're going to need this area cut out. So the next thing we're going to do is go ahead and take our cutoff wheel, the same cutoff wheel that we used to cut the cowling before, and we've used to cut the canopy, and cut this inside mark. Now again, this is maybe a preliminary cut. We may want to widen that a little bit before we do our fiberglassing, but that'll give us a good start. So we just get our lay our cowling down, and we start cutting it off. Okay, and there it's all cut out. Now with this cut out, you have to be careful because your cowling starts to get a little flimsy. Once we rivet and fiberglass the scoop back in, it'll stiffen it back up, so don't worry. But now the hole's cut out, so we can go ahead and place the bottom cowling back onto the engine, or onto the airplane, leaving this area open, don't put your scoop on. It's easier to get some preliminary fitting of your carb air box with the scoop off, and that's why we haven't done any of the fiberglassing yet, is that it's a lot easier to fit this air box having the scoop detachable, so we can fit the air box on, we can fit the scoop to it, because there's a mating of the two that has to be accomplished to get a good ram air system. So from here we're going to go ahead and put the cowling back on and start working on our carb air box. With the bottom part of the cowling now on the fuselage, we'll work on the air box. Now, the instructions for the carb air box are pretty clear, and they even get down to the particular aircraft, an RV4 or an RV6. So we're not going to go into too much detail, just show you sort of the general guidelines. You start by fitting the base unit that attaches directly to the carburetor, and it looks like this. It has a cutout in it for the back of the carburetor, and a cutout here where the accelerator pump goes. Now, on the back of the carburetor there is a drain plug, and that drain plug will interfere with this. With the kit comes a little plug that you can take that drain plug out and put in. It's a little hex, uses an Allen wrench type of fitting, and that's what that little black plug is for. That'll go in the back of the carburetor, and so it won't interfere with this. If you're putting a carburetor temperature probe, which goes in the back, you'll have to do some cutting, which we had to do here. So you start by taking this, and it's already pre-drilled, and it's attached onto the carburetor. Now you may have to open the holes up and deburr this a little bit, but for the most part we found it to fit real well. Okay. The next thing we wanted to do was go ahead and fit the top part, which will go up like this and attached to it. Underneath of that will go the fiberglass part, which is the scoop itself, like this. So you want to go ahead and fit this up in here, and you can clamp it, and you want this to line up with the air scoop of the front of the air scoop. So you got to do some marking where that air scoop is, and you can actually just clamp this in place and then, you know, fit your air scoop on. So we've done that already, but it's just a little trial and error type thing. I'll put a nut in here just to hold it for us. Okay, so that's been put in place, and like I said, what we did, we actually took our air scoop and fit it back on and looked down into the air scoop and saw that we had this alignment where we want it, so we had the most direct shot right on into there. Now, both this and the fiberglass piece come very long. It was about 4 or 5 inches longer, and per the instructions they'll tell you how much to cut off on each of these. So once you've got this fitted on, you then go ahead and fit your fiberglass piece on, and again, once that's fitted on, you put your air scoop back on, and you just physically look down inside here and make sure you've got a nice direct shot. So once you've got that where you like it, the next thing you need to do is modify your air filter a little bit. Now, the problem with the air filter is your accelerator pump. Now, your air filter is held on by a little plate that goes onto the bottom of the filter, and 5 bolts that go down through your base plate and down through here. But where your accelerator pump is, what you have to do is cut a little notch. Now we've cut the notch, fitted the scoop up on there, tightened it down, and then you want to take some RTV silicone and seal off the the air scoop or the air filter where you had to cut it out. So we actually just took a little oil and oiled the accelerator pump, and then squeezed some RTV all around it and let it harden. And now there's a perfect fit. This top will fit real tight against here, and the RTV will fit right against the accelerator pump, and we'll have a nice fit. And it'll go right up in like that. And you'll have a nice filtered air supply. So once you've got that all taken care of, the only thing left is to mate the fiberglass and the aluminum part of the air scoop together, so it'll look like this. Don't forget to drill a 1/8 inch hole in the bottom of your air scoop. What this is for is any excessive fuel that may drip down inside of here. And remember, if you're running in rain, even a little rain, you're going to be blowing water down in there, so you want somewhere to let that water out. And it'll blow right out. There's enough pressure in here, any fluid in there will blow right through that hole. You want to go ahead and drill and cleco this together. And then the last thing that you need to do is to work on the flap, which is going to be your alternate air source. If for some reason this would get clogged in here, or even your inlet would get clogged, this comes with an alternate air source that you can open up inside, which will allow air in here. You can also, with several different variations, supply your carb air for carburetor heat with this flap. So we'll go up to the workbench and we'll show you how to fit that up. Some other things that come with the kit we'll explain right now. You have a piece of rubber sealant that'll be used to seal the air scoop to the cowling, and that's one of the last things to be put on. The other thing is a block of construction foam, and we'll explain that, but don't throw those away. That's not packing material. You're going to need that. You start by constructing the flap by actually putting the fiberglass and the aluminum pieces together. Now this is the way we found to do it. And take a piece of paper and actually set it down on there and mark around it. Now that's just to get a general guideline. From that, we created a template. And from that template, we did some trial and fitting and got it so it would fit inside here. The next thing comes is some swedged hinge, and you actually have to turn it crooked. The hinge, as it would come, would look like this. Okay, just a standard hinge. What you have to do is take one side and give it a half turn and put it together. So it's no longer a flat hinge. Okay, so that's what you're going to start with. Cut that to size. Then go ahead and drill that, and you have to really look at the drawings, but we're going to drill this on the top part first, just to get our holes in. Okay, eventually this will go underneath, or no, this will go on top, so we drill it on the top part like this. Okay, and that's just to get a preliminary fit, and like I said, eventually it'll actually go underneath like this. Then once this was drilled on, we cut a small rectangular hole. Now what that hole was for, so we could fit the hinge underneath. Fit it on here. And the way it'll work out is that it'll actually come up like this. Okay, so that's just to give you so this hinge will move back and forth now. Okay, then you take and put this back on. Put a couple clecos in it to hold it in position for you. Now this is the only way I could figure to get this flap into just the position I wanted. Then you take your flap that you've made and you just used your template. Okay, it's just just like the template. And I had to trim it off a little bit at the top so it would fit right. But once my hinge is in here, now I can go ahead and actually fit my flap in there and get it right where I want it. So it's a nice fit. Then I drill and cleco my little flap to my little hinge. And this really is easier than what I make it look. Okay, now the flap is in. There's a nice clean fit on that flap. You can see when I'd pull carb air heat, I'd block off most of this, and when it's open, it'll come up completely unobstructed. Okay, so that's what you want. You want a nice fit in there. Now, the next thing is take your clecos out, because all you've got is that little rectangular hole in there, which isn't quite enough. So here's your flap, and that would be in carb air heat, which would block the air coming in, carb air heat off, but no hole in the top. On the back side, take your marking pen and mark around the flap, and then come in about an 1/16 to an 1/8 of an inch. And you can see the two lines. You can see the one line where the flap was marked and the next line. That's the line I'll cut off. That'll leave about an 1/8 of an inch that when this comes up, it'll seal. Okay. The last piece is just a little shim that you make out of the aluminum supplied, and that goes between the hinge and the flap, and you can see it won't sit quite level here. See how it wants to spring up, and once you put that little shim in there, that'll stop that, and it'll want to sit nice and flat for you. So you'll have a nice hole in there for hot air to be shot down through. Okay, so we've got that. The last part is the actual activator that moves the hinge, and that comes as a piece of chrome moly, and that'll get put on there like this, so that when you pull this back, it moves the hinge. Let me put a cleco in here and you can see it a little bit better. Okay, you've got your activator arm, so as you pull your activator back, okay, it works that, just like that. Now, the length of this arm will depend on the type of cable you use, because it depends on how much throw you've got in that cable. If you've got a cable that's only going to move an inch or two, you're only going to want this arm real short, so it'll move if your cable has more of a throw. So I wouldn't cut this and drill it yet until you actually get your cable on here and see how much room your cable, how much throw your cable will have. But that's what activates it, that right there.